I wanted to just be perfectly clear on this question of, whether we're assessing things from a hindsight or whether versus what we should have done in foresight. And what I talked about as far as recognizing that we had deep unsaturated soils should have raised enough flags for us to do more information gathering on the front end. We didn't analyze the static loads. We should have. That's not hindsight. That is typical work that we should do. We didn't do it on this project. We focused so much on the bridge. We didn't analyze the static loads as a result of the weight of the embankment, and we should have. That isn't looking back at it. That's every project. When we're building embankments of the size that we had approaching the bridge on this project, that should have been part of it. The portion about the aspect of including a standard specification that included monitoring of the construction of those embankments is standard procedure. We should have done that. We didn't. Again, we missed it when it comes to the embankment. We were so focused on the bridge and wanting to make sure that we checked all the boxes on the design of the bridge and the structure. We didn't pay enough attention to the embankment. And that, again, I just wanted to be very clear. That's not from hindsight. That would be with any project work that we should have done. That I think touch suggestion. First of all, where are we today? Della mentioned, some of the current status of things. We have a little more work to evaluate around how much more of the project we decommission and what state we leave the site in while we look forward to, kind of what's next. So this question of returning the site to a suitable longer-term condition still needs to be answered. And so the remaining funds, I think I mentioned in the $3 million range, we've estimated that probably half of that will go towards this effort to further decommission the project. We've still got girders in place. As Della mentioned, it looks as if from all the work that's been done and the supplemental work from Cornforth this summer, that it would be very difficult for us to figure out a way, to design a way to utilize the existing mechanically stabilized earth walls and abutments to build a similar bridge in this location with a high enough level of certainty that we would bring that recommendation to you as a commission. It's not that it can't be done. As Chris mentioned, there's use of lightweight materials that could be incorporated that we didn't design to initially. The idea of viaducts are a potential, but again, there's not enough evidence or experience in building on these types of diatomaceous materials, saturated, unconsolidated, perfectly preserved silica from diatoms to be able to bring a recommendation to you to utilize what's out there today with a high level of certainty. But we're still doing that work. We're going to negotiate with the contractor, as I mentioned a little bit ago, for Commissioner Simpson, the termination of this contract. And so part of our request today is that you authorize us to enter into those contract negotiations to close out this contract. And that would be the responsibility of the contract administration engineer for ODOT in conjunction with FHWA. With regard to the remaining funds, part of the request is to revise the STIP and repurpose the remaining construction funds that would have went towards the completion of the project, to further analyze the geotechnical site analysis, to do further investigation with the idea that understanding better this very unique subsurface condition that we have at Wickiup Junction could better inform us on a recommendation if there is interest in getting back to our original goal of separating US 97 from the railroad tracks. Is there a better location? We don't even know what the extent of these underlying lacustrine deposits are at Wickiup Junction. That further analysis could inform that discussion and from it bring a recommendation back to the commission on whether there is an economical way to achieve the original goal of the project. And that would be evaluating alternative alignment options, locations for the bridge, and mapping the extent of that subsurface material. And then the refinement planning that Chair Boehne referenced. We're interested in working, of course, with the City of La Pine and Deschutes County on both short-term and long-term improvements in the area of La Pine and Wickiup Junction and South 97 in Deschutes County to address a lot of the issues, safety issues that the mayor referenced, and whether we could bring those forward as recommendations in a STIP update or even with the remaining funds here would be part of the request for you to approve today. I think that was it. That's all I had.
Ms. Mosher, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I would add is that the additional geotechnical analysis would really be taking advantage of the existing instrumentation that we have in place that we installed in the initial 5 borings. So a lot of work went into putting in the initial equipment, and the proposal would revolve around creating an automated data collection that we could use to collect data that would go the next several months or even years, just utilizing already previous investment. So it's not a significant future investment. Thank you.
Just to clarify, so we approved 17 million for the project. So we have 13 million, and was it 4 million in engineering? What was the? Could you just explain the breakdown of the 17 million?
Yeah, there's a STIP funding summary in your packet that identifies the amount of engineering work that was programmed and actually.
So we spent. I remember reviewing it, but just to clarify, so we spent
1.6 for engineering.
Okay.
We spent some on right-of-way. Most of it was public land BLM.
Okay.
But $750,000 on right-of-way.
Okay. Okay. I got it. Thank you. So if we're going forward, request. I mean, it seems to me like we want to minimize the amount of money we have to spend to tie off this project, and it doesn't look particularly promising that down the road that this terrain is going to be conducive to doing a project here. It's not going to change, maybe over the next 1,000 years it will, but not in our immediate future. So, I mean, it seems like we ought to tie this off, move forward, and then, and maybe it's another pot of money or years offering, and is there a way for us to be supportive of that and along that corridor? So and maybe it's not this pot of money, and maybe we don't amend it, but I do think he's come forward with a legitimate request that we should look at.
And I think it's important to note that there's also work being done in this corridor.
We have or as the mayor mentioned, actually, we have towards an opportunity for us to look at, again, shorter term, smaller type investments that could enhance safety in the corridor at some of the intersections that the mayor referenced as part of that project. And would do that, could do that, would plan on doing that as far as any refinement planning effort. So we'd, again, not want to lose track of our original goal of grade separating BNSF from US 97 from the railroad. But in addition to further evaluating alternatives that we could at least share with the commission, we could look at, again, those short-term safety improvements as enhancements that could be made part of the pavement preservation that's currently programmed.
So, Madam Chair, in the interest of moving on, do we need to amend this action item to include those safety recommendations, at least to consider it as the mayor suggested, or is this separate?
I think they would be, we need to close out the project itself or give recommendations for movement forward. And then if you could walk us through what would be the next steps for working with a refinement plan, or do you feel that it's all packaged together?
I think it's somewhat packaged together. I mean, I think the work that we have to decommission the project is, other than the commission's concurrence in us moving forward with that process, so that we could authorize, so that you could authorize ODOT to move forward with closing out the contract.
There is an asterisk, though, that's actually here around the embankments and some cost savings as well. So I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing from the commission, and I'll wait until I also hear other commission members that are interested in this direction, we would try to minimize those costs as best we can so that we can utilize those in the safety needs that have been identified today and other ones which may be identified in the future.
Yes, I think all of that. I think, you know, we've got additional work to do, and we would look for concurrence from FHWA on any additional work that we do to decommission or remove aspects of the project. And so we're not, you know, we haven't specified in detail what that would look like. There may be some advantage of leaving some of the embankment out to, in place to further evaluate and understand how materials perform under those kinds of loads in these kinds of conditions in the future. And we haven't, you know, we really haven't explored the value of the learning that we could still experience from what's out there today, balanced with, you know, a conversation that we'll need to have with our neighboring public landowners in the area, BLM, for example, on, you know, where they would like to leave, in what condition they would like to see us leave the project site in. And of course, the railroad itself is an interested stakeholder in the outcome of that conversation. So, so we have further work to do, again, in cooperation and in conjunction with FHWA and exploring what that process looks like. And then in terms of refining additional work in the area of Wickiup Junction, likewise, I think, you know, we would be looking at a scoping effort that would define sort of what the extent of that refinement plan could include, and again seek concurrence from FHWA, especially if we were using the remaining funds on this project as the funding mechanism for enabling us to do that work. So what's in and what's out would be part of that scoping effort that we could bring back to the commission at some point in the future as a recommendation once we've got that detail worked out, which we do not have today.
So I think we, and in a conversation we had here, I think you just got to come back and say what it's going to look like. And we need to know what the refinement plan is and kind of how it's going to be there. But in the interest of moving forward, Madam Chair, and with your indulgence, I might request that we do a minor amendment to this that would allow at least the option to consider some of what the mayor has requested. And accordingly, I would request that we approval of the decommissioning of the US Highway 97 at Wickiup Junction, Lapine project, and use the remaining funds for further geotechnical site analysis, transportation refinement planning, and to scope short consider safety improvements around Lapine, including bike ped, as the mayor suggested. So.
Further comments? I know that Commissioner Brown, you had a comment. Would you like to go ahead?
Just, I think we're asking too much with the money that's remaining. Mayor, I totally respect what you want, and I would almost, you know, maybe we should do a separate motion to address the concerns from the mayor, because your points are extremely valid. My comment here is when we get the ACT member up is, how do we establish those priorities? Your priority is safety in general. ODOT's priority here is grade separation. So I think we need to truly address your priorities from a safety standpoint to include bike ped and a potential shared bike path. But I think it appears to me, it feels to me that that's separate from this project. And I think with only, and clarify this, Bob, it appears that your remaining funds are 1.3 million, not 3 as you mentioned. And
Correct,
with
yes.
1.3 million, you don't have a whole lot to play with once you talk to the railroad. So I don't think tying this, the mayor's concerns with safety, I think we'll run out of money before we even get to the mayor's concerns. So I don't want to overlook his concerns, and I'd rather take that up as a separate motion. I'm happy to vote on this and say yes, but I think we would lose the impact that you want to make, Commissioner O'Halloran, by adding to this motion.
Yeah, and Commissioner Brown, I agree with you that this feels like too big a bite, and I agree there. But, and all I would say is that we consider safety improvements, and I realize that that's probably another bucket of money, and that there's also regional considerations on how things are prioritized, et cetera, in the area. And so I don't by any means want to supersede those considerations and regional prioritization, et cetera. But I just think that, to the mayor's point, if we just say consider it, it allows us to at least make sure that we're keeping an eye on it, and that Bob, you and your team come back and say, here's what we ought to do, here's what the act is recommending, here's what with the mayor's input, and I want to make sure his voice is heard, that the impact on that particular segment we have to, and so I realize it's worthy of consideration, not what we want to do, and I'm just saying that I'm happy to withdraw my amendment, and it just under consideration, keeping the language in place. So let's move forward. It is pending, so it's under consideration, and I would just ask that we call the question.
Chair Boehne, members of the commission, just to draw some clarity, if I could draw your attention to the last paragraph under recommendations in the letter in your packet, speaks to this topic, and the idea of what you would be approving is described there. The results of the geotechnical and transportation current and forthcoming studies would be used to formulate recommendations to bring back to the Transportation Commission for future consideration. The recommendations may be used to develop a scope of work for a future STIP project to complete selected improvements, not to exclude or and particularly include short-term improvements that could be included as part of that preservation projects. But what we're talking about really here is a refinement plan. We're not talking about building anything with the remaining funds necessarily. It would be used to scope what we would come back with in terms of a recommendation for further investment in the area of Lapine and Wikiup Junction. And clearly, you know, that could include, again, the original goal of the project, an alternative for achieving a grade separation of US 97 from BNSF. But we would, what we've anticipated is that we would also at the same time want to look at short-term safety improvements in the area that could be made part of our pavement preservation project that's currently programmed.
And I think we may get there as well with some of those safety pieces that the mayor mentioned, because if we, and when we do have accidents, that stacking that then leads out onto that area. So it could be one and the same, where we're still getting some safety improvements for that at-grade crossing in some of those noted improvements as well. So I think we leave the motion as it is if with that clarification, and I would check with the commission if that meets the needs. Okay, all right, so all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Director Garrett, if you have comments, I think that would be great, but then also I think a follow-up on this one in terms of, you know, protocols and lessons learned and things in which going forward. And then I know that Mr. Cunningham has left, but I very much appreciated his comments and would hope that he also, seems interested and knowledgeable. If he wanted to also give us further comments, that would be welcomed as well. But Director Garrett.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for, I think, the scrutiny and just the honesty of the conversation from the Commission. I think you've certainly touched on not only the emotion and the sting of this. I think Commissioner O'Halloran said it best. We have spent $10 million plus without achieving an outcome. This agency has failed in this project. It also should be noted that we've failed in probably the highest calling as a public agency, not our stewardship responsibility, right? And that stings. And that will inform, I think, the direction that was spoken to in terms of bringing an independent set of eyes with our federal highway partners to review the geotech practices at the agency over the course of this project. Were those geotech practices adhered to? If they weren't, why? If they don't exist, why not? I mean, that level of scrutiny. So it's comprehensive in terms of the rigor that I have asked for to bring this independent set of eyes in here, to look at really the knowns going backwards and then forming the unknowns, because that will change, that lessons learned will change, I think, the way we do business as an agency. And there's the inflection point, right? It may be structural. It may deal with what Mr. Cunningham put on the table as a legitimate issue, and Commissioner Lohman certainly broached issues that cascade from that. But in terms of the appropriate eyes and the stamps, the peer reviews, that protocol and discipline, are we advancing the state of practice? Are we engaged in the best practices in geotech? Those are legitimate questions. They must move us to understand what's happening today, in the past, but more importantly, into the future. And I think Mayor Scott is spot on. The safety exposure in La Pine is real. He's articulated a host of these issues. And I think
And with that, we'll go on to the next item. Thank you. Next, we have a discussion to allow authority under ORS rules to solicit proposals and negotiate agreements for potential public-private partnership for developing and implementing a tolling technology. So we will move on to something a little lighter. Tolling, of course, everyone loves in the state of Oregon, so let's go there.
Catherine Jones, our Innovative Programs Project Manager. And today we're asking you to enroll open architecture tolling into the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program. There we go. As you know, Section 120 of House Bill 2017 requires ODOT to submit approval for value pricing to FHWA by December of 2018. In your August meeting, you heard an update on the Region 1 feasibility study and the Policy Advisory Committee in the Portland region. We have this overall effort divided into several work streams, but today we're going to focus on the technology and back office functions work stream, the parts of the potential tolling system that have to do with capturing data from vehicles, processing that data, and completing the billing cycle. In our presentation today, we're going to cover what is the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program, what open architecture is and why we are pursuing it, and then finally our recommendations to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Art.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Art James with the Office of Innovative Partnerships. Some of you may be more familiar with this program than others, so I'm just going to give a high-level overview of the program, and then Catherine will go into specifics about the request this morning. The Innovative Partnership Program was established by the legislature to develop partnerships with private entities in innovative ways. It's really an important tool in ODOT's toolbox to engage the private sector in ways that are different from processes. The objective is to maximize entrepreneurship and project development, and to expedite project delivery, and where possible, to try to leverage public financing with private sources of capital where we can. The definition of a transportation project in the OIPP statute is exceedingly broad. It says any proposed or existing undertaking that facilitates any mode of transportation. So we've used this authority in a broad spectrum of projects, anywhere from highways, bridges, rail, ports. We're even developing some telecommunication projects right now, and maybe in front of you again in the near future with some other innovative ideas that we have. The program allows for both solicited projects, and that's what we're asking for today, is authority to solicit proposals on a particular project. It also provides authority for unsolicited proposals that go through a very rigorous vetting process to survive the proposal, so that's the only one we've had in 10 years of the Innovative Partnership Program, and didn't come out with a great outcome. But our solicited projects have been very successful, and I'll tell you about a few of them that ODOT has been giving awards for. The project proposals are submitted by private firms. It allows private partners to come in early stages of the project. It's very different from our standard design bid build. It allows kind of the partnership to be in the project development phases. It allows proposals to be selected by best value as opposed to least cost. And through this program, the OTC is involved in several stages of the project development. So number one, basically what we're asking today is to enroll this project in OIPP and giving us the authority to solicit proposals and to evaluate those proposals. We will then, if we find something that has merit, negotiate agreements. There's an interim step in between the negotiation and number 5 there, where DOJ reviews any agreements that we enter into for legal sufficiency. Then we bring those agreements back to the OTC for final approval before the project can be implemented. Major provisions of the OIPP law: it allows for public-private partnerships that are governed by negotiated agreements. There are protections within the law that protect private entities, their proprietary business information or trade secrets, that type of thing. There are extensive Oregon administrative rules that govern how we execute the project. And a major portion of this is it exempts ODOT from a lot of the provisions of ORS Chapter 279, which is the public contracting law. Exempts essentially that process can be very rigid and time-consuming at times, and it fits very well for most public works type projects because both the public owners and the contracting community understand that marketplace and use it well, but there are some projects that just don't fit that mold very well, and the Innovative Partnership Program allows us to be more flexible and nimble to address those types of projects. Also requires consultation with local governments and consistency with local, regional, and state planning efforts. Some of the projects, just as examples that you may be familiar with, the Solar Highway project was a great partnership that we entered into with Portland General Electric. They put in solar arrays on ODOT right-of-way. The one depicted here is a rest area off of I-5, 1.7 megawatt array, and as a project that has been gained national and international recognition for creatively using ODOT right-of-way to generate revenue. The second project there, the West Coast Electric Highway, is one that I was integrally involved in. We did a partnership with a firm to put in charging stations around the state. And Oregon now has some of the most robust charging infrastructure per capita of any state in the nation because of that project. And the Origo project, one of the features of OIPP is it allows us to negotiate with multiple entities. And you're familiar with Origo. We have several different contract administrators for that project, and we couldn't have gotten there without having enrolled that in OIPP. So as I said, we're going to talk to you about a particular project today. There are other ones that I hope to be able to bring forward to you, but I'll turn it over to Catherine now to talk about today's request.
Members of the Commission, my name is Catherine Jones, and I'm with the Office of Innovation in ODOT, and it's my job to tell you what in the world we mean when we say open architecture tolling. Here is a list of states, those that are highlighted, that currently do tolling. We have reached out to every single one of them. We continue to man our 2-person call center out of the Office of Innovation to reach out to every single tolling authority and tolling system. We want to know what worked, what didn't work, what recommendations they had, what successes they had, and how administration is different than what they may have pictured during project build. We really want Oregon to walk into this with eyes wide open in the tolling world. We are also very closely working with our partners in Washington. We've met with them several times, and we continue to gather lessons learned from them as well as advice and just build a really good rapport with them. Before we kind of go into what we learned from other states and other systems, I think it's important to learn how a typical tolling system operates in the United States. There are some deviations, but as an aggregate, this is how they usually look. So there are 2 main contracts typically with the tolling system. One is for the system provider. The system provider will collect the data from the vehicle as soon as they hit the gantry, that like read a toll tag, they'll take a picture of the license plate. They gather that data and then they send it to a back office system. And a back office system is where most of the work occurs. That's where account management will occur, billing, inventory for the toll tags, image processing, which is a large portion of each contract for each state. That means that they go through the license plate images and they read and they try to identify the vehicle owner. And customer service. Customer service usually takes 2 forms. One is a call center, and the other is a walk-in facility where people can go and ask questions face-to-face or pay cash for their tolls. The back office system contractor then sends money to the state. After talking to states, we begin to see similar themes emerge. One of them is that it's difficult contract management. Though that system looks very simple, it's a lot of data and a lot of money being transferred between private entities. And Virginia referred to this as a black box type of contract management. And states typically have very little insight into how their system works. And so when a contractor wants to raise costs for a system upgrade, they don't know if the cost that they quoted is accurate, and they don't know if that system upgrade is necessary. Another theme that we heard is high administrative costs or operating expenses for the toll system. With a closed system, there's very little incentive to compete, to drive down costs, or innovate. It's also incredibly difficult and expensive to recontract with a new company to manage the system that was custom built by another. So if you don't like your current contractor, you're kind of stuck unless you want to spend a lot of money to get another one. There's interoperability problems right now with tolling systems. So there is a federal mandate that tolling systems should be interoperable by October 2016. They've missed that goal. States are not interoperable except through a very manual process of emailing and spreadsheets, and back office systems among states don't talk. Furthermore, technology is leapfrogging what is used in the tolling world, and tolling technology is currently very far behind the concept of connected vehicle. And the more connected vehicles that we get on our roadways, the toll tag will probably very quickly go the way of the toll booth. People wanted a connected transportation experience, and the tolling industry and the toll tag simply don't provide that. You get one toll tag, you have one toll count, it pays tolls, and that's it. So ODOT is coming to tolling at a very interesting time. Instead of developing a system that is based on toll industry convenience or on state convenience, we have the opportunity to build a system that makes user experience paramount by creating a technology-agnostic tolling system, an open system. This would allow any certified toll tag or GPS device, such as a roadside assistance companies, insurance devices, or embedded vehicle telematics, to be used to transfer tolling information to a back-end system, and this is how it would work. We would geofence the tolling area. A geofence is a virtual boundary that can be of any scale or type. And in-vehicle technology detects the boundary of a toll and charges a toll rate to that person's account. Account management could be handled by several or multiple private sector companies that already have these systems in place and already have this technology in place. Oregon would simply interface with them. We are meeting with this type of system, we would meet our customers where they are, with the devices and services that they already want, and bundle tolling with them. ODOT would establish the interface protocols so any private sector company or another state could connect and talk to our system. And it's not tied to one contractor. It's tied to a competitive, open marketplace. We had this idea. Orgo is based on this type of a principle. We went out to our sister states and we've been asking them. We went out with a request for information to the private sector to see what they thought about it. What we got was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of about times. But there is some trepidation because they don't know exactly the roles that they each are going to play and how this would actually roll out. As with any decision, there are pros and cons. If we went with a typical tolling standard, if we implemented tolling in Oregon, as every state has done, everybody knows what role they have to play. Government knows what role we have to play, the contractor knows what role they have to play, and the public can kind of guess what role they play in systems. The driving forces, however, paramount, it provides users with choice. This will allow them to bundle tolling with something that they want, like roadside assistance or insurance. It allows them to just put tolling on top of that and with that. Furthermore, it allows flexible. Because the private industry are driving how the system functions, it is much more agile and adaptable to new vehicle technology as soon as it enters the market. All we care in ODOT is that we get the information. How they want to get that information, what technology they use, can constantly change as the marketplace changes. It would also allow us to be more interoperable and provide there's no manual transmission platform. Sector markers, private sector companies, because essentially, I'm turning it back over.
Smartphones and to alleviate the issue, but it's also never been done before. And so what we'd like to do is further investigate this possibility so that we can then recommend to you to choose an open or a closed system. Art gave you an overview of enrolling OIPP projects, and with your approval, ODOT would like to enroll this as an OIPP project to know if open architecture tolling is doable. We need to know more about the costs, both for project startup and long-term operations. We need to know more about where those interfaces would be between various companies, between us, between our sister state to support. If approved as a project, ODOT would move to gather the system requirements, develop a common system, a concept of operations for open tolling, which would then help us communicate what the system is and what it does. We would also like the vendor that can talk to his peers and help us to come play with us. Closely.